Hello again, and welcome to the first of a multi-part series on the Jewish God. And during this series, we will hopefully try to examine, explore different aspects, different elements of the, what does it mean to have faith? A lot of people say that they have faith, they believe in God, but they might not actually know what that actually means. And that term might mean something to one person and a totally different thing to someone else. The majority of Americans, and maybe even the majority of the world, believes in God, but as Jews, we have to ask, well, what does it mean to believe in the Jewish God? And what does the Jewish religion require of us vis-a-vis issues of faith? So in this series, we're going to attempt to address many of these particular issues relating to God. We're going to deal with what does it mean, what are the characteristics of God, what is the evidence that God exists, how do we know that God exists. What does that require of us? Once we believe in God, well, how does that impact our lives? Just various elements of the relationship of man and God, and obviously we're going to also address the many problems that arise when someone accepts the idea of God. The problems, the challenges, the philosophical, theological issues that come up with regards to faith. But I wanted to start off by maybe unloading one of my pet peeves, and I have a whole pet store of them. But this is one of my biggest pet peeves, and this is the idea of people in today's society not actually spending time to consider the idea of God in a serious way, in a serious intellectual way. What I mean by this is like this. In truth, intellectually, if you were to be intellectually honest about the issue of God, you'll find that in reality, only two options could actually be true. Only God could either exist or not exist. There really isn't any third option. Either he exists or not. And that's right, as simple as we could possibly break it down to being. Those are the only two options that exist. And whether or not we believe or God exists or God does not exist, that one item, that one piece of information will alter the way someone behaves more than any other piece of information. If God exists, well, then the world has a purpose, and we're here for a purpose, and we have a meaning, and we have morals, and all those, life has meaning if God exists. If God does not exist, well, then we're nothing more than a bunch of atoms or cells or just identityless beings that are just put here for 60, 70 years, who are able to experience pain and pleasure, maybe 100 years, able to experience pain and pleasure, and try to maximize everything that we can to have as good of a time as we possibly can, and for on our time, we're crawling this planet. So God can either exist or not exist, and the way we act and the way we live our lives and the morals when we teach our kids is radically different with respect to life with God and life without God. So, on one hand, there's only two options. On the other hand, this one little piece of information that directs our lives will alter the way we actually live more than any other piece of information. And my pet peeve is that people don't actually spend enough time doing their due diligence in intellectually examining this issue. How many people actually sat down by themselves for a half hour and spent any significant time trying to address this issue using their own intellectual faculties to try to determine, does God exist or does God not exist? Typically, we're just a product of our society, of our country, of our culture, where we grew up, when we grew up in history, and we just follow along, go with the flow, and let others determine this most important piece of information that will shape the way we live our lives. So, the first thing I would try to impress upon you is that this idea, talking about God, is very important. And unfortunately, in America, most people have spent more time debating Android versus iOS, which smartphone operating system and the pros and cons of which cell phone they should get, which is at this point in time, it's pretty much the same. You know, it pretty much does not change your life. But there's blogs about it, and there's podcasts about it, and you read about it in, online and on the internet and YouTube. Everyone's talking about this. Well, which phone do you get? A different phone? We're going to upgrade. Another 0.5 gigahertz, whatever. I'm just making believe as if I know what I'm talking about. People spend time talking about nonsense. And the idea of God and just trying to intellectually, right, using as honest an appraisal method that you could possibly come up with to try to evaluate and make a decision, and a very important decision that will change your life one way or the other. Unfortunately, most people, I'm not saying everyone, but most people don't actually spend the time. So that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to address the whole issue of God from an intellectual perspective, from obviously a traditional Jewish perspective, to try to make sense out of this very important item in our lives. And hopefully you guys will be there with us in this journey, and hopefully we'll be successful in trying to gain some clarity in the issue of God. But for now, I implore upon you to take some time and just really reconsider whatever you believe about God, right? Maybe write it down, right? Maybe organize it in your mind. Try to make sense out of this issue, because this is a very important issue. It's the most important piece of information the most important decision you'll have to make in your life. Do I believe in God? Really? Is it only two options? Either he exists or he doesn't exist, right? Do I really believe in God? What does that actually mean? And how is that going to impact my life? Thank you so much.